Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Fifth night of Chanuka, 5781, 14th of December, the very end of 14th of December, 2020. And I'm so delighted to have, well, we're Zooming, so if you guys are, you can be watching this, you can be listening to this, whatever you want to do, with Annika Hernroth-Rothstein, which asked why you never just made Henstein or whatever out of that. Finally, back in freezing cold Sweden after a long sojourn. So, journalist, Israel advocate, constant probably the most curious person maybe that I've ever met. Met Annika in person. We were at Limud together in the UK. I don't know if it was 2 years running or just 1 year. I was there 2017, 2018. We were definitely there together in 18.
We were.
We were. I remember one very fun evening with a whole lot of us hanging out together, and like the worst food on the planet, even for the Brits, it was bad. But
it was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. But it's great to see you again, and really very excited about the book that you put out a few months ago called Exile. So maybe just tell my listeners who might not have heard of you yet, which we're rectifying right now, a little bit about your background. Sweden, like, you know, how you were raised in Sweden, you moved to Sweden. Your English is so great. How did you get involved with all the things that you're involved with right now? So go for it.
Like, wow, that's a lot. Okay, so I'll try. So I am Swedish, like Swedish, born and bred, despite my English. And I actually grew up in this like really small fisherman's village on the west coast of Sweden, had horses and sheep and all that. Like I'm a simple girl from the country, as I like to say. And I was raised like super secular, maybe almost totally assimilated, on the west coast in the 80s and 90s when I grew up. And then kind of found myself Jewishly in my late teens, early 20s. And it was never I kind of like slid into the shtetl journalism, as I like to call it, when you write, because I wrote almost only about Jewish issues and Israel for a while. And it came out of necessity more than something that I sought out, just because I think I have this, you know, pathos when it comes to justice issues and growing up and becoming more and more Jewishly aware, growing up in Sweden, coming of age in Sweden, and then, you know, living a life here that just seemed unjust from a Jewish perspective.
In what
Plenty
way?
of in the sense that, you know, I never really encountered hardcore anti-Semitism when I was younger, but I started reacting to it for real when I became more observant. Like I'm still not the best Jew. I like to say that I'm more religious than I am observant. I wear jeans, if that's an explanation to anyone. I know. Okay. So, but when I started keeping kosher, like it was a process that I went through, you know, with the help of Chabad, like a lot of other people. We have like the most amazing Chabad in Stockholm. And with the help of the rabbi there, I sort of was nudged a little bit, you know, year by year to take those steps. And the more observant I became, the more I realized how difficult it is. You know, you have to actually keep kosher to realize, oh, wait, kosher slaughter is outlawed here since 1937. How do we get food? Wow. And it's unsafe for me to, you know, be at the Jewish school or around the synagogue. And when you see all the guards, like heavily armed guards outside the synagogue on the high holidays, you start asking yourself, like, wait, why is it just us? Like, why does no one else suffer from, like, what is that all about? And so it started with me asking pretty naive questions, I would say, in my early 20s. And also it had to do with, you know, motherhood and other things that kind of mature you and make you more of a fighter, in the sense that you don't want your children to go through the things that you went through. And I grew up, you know, I was a teenager in the 90s, in the mid and late 90s in Sweden. And we had a lot of neo-Nazis in the West Coast at the time. Like there was a huge neo-Nazi movement at the time. And also it was pointed out to me that being Jewish was something particular, because I hadn't grown up knowing that really. Like I grew up knowing that my mother was Jewish and that my father wasn't. And then, you know, I had it pointed out to be my mother that, oh, your hair is dark because, you know, or you look a certain way because, you know, and your grandmother looks like, and it was usually having to do with looks. Like it was always a very superficial thing. But then it was when I encountered these neo-Nazis that I understood, oh, it runs really deep. Because they hate me so much, it must mean, my conclusion was that must mean that there's something incredibly special about being a Jew, because otherwise they couldn't hate me this much. Like these people, like we were all in our teens, and yet I realized that we're on somehow different teams and we're adversaries and we're enemies. And what is that about? What does that mean? So it kind of, that shot me on, you know, onto this journey that I then continued on through my 20s, I would say. And just, I started going to shul, I started, you know, learning everything.
Wow.
And in a sense, you know, it's why also I feel very passionate about converts, in the sense that I understand, like, yes, I had a Jewish mother, but it doesn't mean that you know anything. You know, you don't get Jewish knowledge with your breast milk. That's not how it works. And you can feel really as a stranger. Although you belong to this family, you can feel like a stranger when you walk into a shul, when you know nothing. And it was a process of years and years and years of me like walking into a shul the first time, knowing nothing, and then going home, learning, coming back the next time, knowing a little more. Like just the process of me learning how to bench was a major thing for me in my early 20s.
Right.
And then understanding why I was benching. Like it was really
grace after meal, for those who don't understand the vernacular. Yes.
So I was
like, she's sitting on a bench. What's she doing? Okay.
I should be a better Jew and say like because how much time. But it's like, yes. So I was doing and then understanding why I was doing it. It was a real process for me. So I ended up as a person who never took any of this for granted, which is why I think I almost have sort of an almost childlike passion for it, because I understand what it's like to almost lose it. Right. Because when you're the last person in a chain, in a family, and had I not, no one else would have picked that up. So I was the one to bring that forward and then bring it into my family. And so I feel very, very passionate about like anti-Jewish legislation, about fighting that, about fighting for everyday life. And you know, I realized very early on, as I've always traveled a lot, and everywhere you see plaques sort of dedicated to dead Jews, and, you know, horrors and where Jewish life used to exist. And my thought was like, but wait, like I want Jewish life now, not like, I'm not so interested in the plaque that will be dedicated to me and my people, like after I'm dead. Right. But I would like to live now. And how do we accomplish that? And so for me, it became important for me to point out hypocrisy when I saw it, and when I saw wrongdoing, and when I saw these things that were clearly anti-Semitic, but then you encounter this other thing, which is the huge taboo of just calling a spade, that then you suddenly see a lot of, which is in the European Jewish culture, I think, to a sense that other Jews will say, well, maybe careful with the anti-Semitism. Like, let's not, like, let's wait until it's really bad. I was like, no, but it's that this is really bad. Like, this is, you know, really the soft terror of low expectations, in the sense that we've just gotten accustomed to, you know, all this crap, like just always being at the brunt of all of this. Right. So, you know, I guess you asked me for a short answer, but this is the short answer of like, okay, so that's how that came about. And then I sort of widened the circle, because I used to be, you know, I started out as a political advisor here in Sweden, and that was what I thought I would be doing with my life. And then I just started writing, and the more I started writing, I realized, oh, I think maybe this is what I actually should be doing. And the more I started coming to Israel and understanding Israel in a sense, and the tension between the diaspora and Israel, and and what it means to be in exile, you know, then that became very interesting to me, you know, and the kind of fraught relationship that a lot of diaspora Jews have with Israel.
It's
And
interesting
that,
that you use the word exile, which is the title of your book, because
yeah,
exile has, I would say, more of a negative connotation, like you're not where you
yeah,
want to be. You were thrown out of where
right,
you wanted to be. And
yeah,
the term is usually what someone would say is I live in the diaspora, if they say it at all, which
yeah,
doesn't, I think, have that heavy overlay. Because let's face it now, Jews do have the choice. I mean, you're not,
right,
except in a few places around the world, some of which you went to,
right.
you know, any Jew can come and not live in exile anymore. So it's an interesting mix of terminology that you use. Like when you called your book that,
Yeah.
what was the idea behind it?
Well, it's powerful to me because usually I use the word galut and not diaspora, because I think it's important for us to recognize them, because one of the things that I encounter the most are anti-Israel Jews, like these like anti-Zionist, very left-wing Jews. And I wanted to, you know, I like a conversation. The basis of any decent journalism is just to have a conversation and to not go in like full force aggressive. And I think part of why I've had been blessed with some success is because I'm genuinely curious.
Yes.
No matter what it is, I'm genuinely curious and I want to understand. And what I came to understand is, you know, we all feel that we should be in Israel, but then some of us kind of fess up to it. And then some, and a lot of people live sort of excusing or fighting on the other side and saying, we don't need Israel, or Israel is that, and Israel is this. But it is, we're torn. Like we have a lot of identities. And my book is all about those identities. I have a choice today to be in Israel. And I have to recognize that I make the choice not to be, but that I feel that I should. Like it's important for me to admit to myself that I really feel I should. Because otherwise you go on the defense. And I think a lot of Jews are always on the defense with Israel because it's Israel is our nagging mother. You know, Israel is, you know, yeah, why don't you come visit? You know, why don't you never call? And we all feel that we should be there. Like that's the right thing to do. That's home. But what I tried to explore in my book, and I think I was able to, is that this really difficult thing happens because we were, you know, cast out of all these different places. And we ended up, you know, like shards of glass all over the world. And then children grow up like myself, carrying so many different things inside of ourselves, that I have this really strong European identity as well.
Right.
Like I always say, and I make a point of saying I'm a Jew first before I'm Swedish, because that's my strongest and most important identity. That's what defines me. But it would be a lie to deny that I'm annoyed sometimes, a lot of the time when I'm in Israel. Like it's a fight for me. It's difficult for me to hide the European part of me.
You're culturally a European. Yeah.
I'm very much so. And
Yes.
also not only that, but there's a love of, you know, that I have for the country that I was born in, and certain feelings that I have that are like very particularly Swedish, of waking up in a morning in June, you know, and feeling, you know, the dew in the grass and all of these like very Swedish, being on a fjord, like, you know, all of these things, very Swedish in certain ways. And I think it's important that we allow ourselves all of these different identities. And it's fitting with Hanukkah in a way, because these are all, they can all be alive inside of us. But the problem is, of course, what Europe has done to us and to our families in the past is say, this is your choice. Now you cast away this or you cast away that, but you have to be Swedish. And this is but I believe that I can say that, okay, I'm a Jew. I have a Swedish passport. You know, my heart is here. My heart is in Israel. You know, I carry all of these things. And one of the things that are most difficult and that I get into arguments about most often in Israel with Israelis is speaking about anti-Semitism in Europe, for example. A lot of them I'm very close to will say, well, like it's dead. Like just go. Who cares?
Europe is finished. Yeah.
Yes. Who cares about this? Like no one wants to hear your whining. But the point and the passion behind my book is that all of these places around the world have particular Jewish identity that if you go to Iran, those are Persian Jews, and their expression of Judaism deserves to be cherished and preserved and respected. And if you go to Morocco, also part of my book, that's also true. Siberia in the book, also true. And Swedish Jewry. We have a very specific identity. Like, we speak Jewish Swedish, where we, you know,
Right.
I mean, it comes from a dark place where we didn't want to say certain words in Swedish, and so you mix Yiddish and Hebrew and Swedish, and you make this, you
Like
know,
a code. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Rather than say Israel, you will say the land. You know, have you been to the land? You know, things like that. And these things are fascinating to me, and it was so amazing to go around the world and see myself in all of these different people, because they have the same dichotomy within them as I do. They struggle with the very same issues. And then there are a couple of things that connect us no matter where I go. And, you know, if I'm in Iran, if I'm in Irkutsk, if I'm in Finland or Tunisia, our love of Israel and our connection to Jerusalem, those are the things that, you know, apart from, of course, prayer and Hebrew and these things.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, but the number one thing that we talk about is Jerusalem. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think that trying to blend us all together into just one homogenous Jew, that's the wrong frame of mind, because we are in exile. Like, what happened. This is us now. And we really are the miracle. I just posted I always do, you know, when I light the candles on Hanukkah, I tried to post it and tweet about it and write something. And I wrote today that, you know, we are, by the grace of God, we are the miracle.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's not, we speak about the diaspora, and especially that it's always problematic, you know, and especially when Israel and especially from the government come up with some initiative and they're like, oh, let's deal with the diaspora. And then we're a problem that you have to deal with. But what I'm trying to do with the book is say, not just the problem. Like, maybe also, like, this relationship is really important, and we need to celebrate it.
I think, first of all, I think what you did is incredibly important, especially if some of these communities aren't going to last for a long time. Although in the book, you're very optimistic about certain communities. For example, like Djerba, the island off of Tunisia, where they have an average of 4 kids, a family. Like, it's a, you know, it's a booming community. It's not on its way out with, like, let's say some places in Iran, which maybe have 8 or 9, you know, old men in a little synagogue, and you just know that that's about to be done. But I just want to read the list of the table of contents of your book, just so people should hear what you read. Djerba, Uzbekistan, Cuba, Morocco, Iran, Finland, Siberia, Sweden, Turkey, Palermo, and Venezuela. So it's like you didn't go to Flatbush.
No, I made a point, because I also think, like, it's so annoying that all we talk about is either like Europe or America when we talk about diaspora, and then we forget that there are a lot of colors in the Jewish rainbow. And those are the most exceptional communities that have usually the oldest expression of Jewish identity as well, in a very, like, condensed way. And I made a decision early on. I will try to, as far as, like, majority religion, I was trying to, you know, have Christians and have Muslims and all these things, and also completely secular societies and former Soviet states. But I didn't want to, like, go to New York or, you know, go to Poland or have the same conversation all over again. I wanted to make a point also why there are pictures in the book for people to understand that there are Jews of color, there are Jews who live uncomfortably in Muslim countries, there are Jews who live comfortably in Muslim countries. Like, these are, you know, there's a variety, because there's an idea. It's not just anti-Semites who have a very, you know, firm idea on what the typical Jew is. We too, among us, have an idea about what a Jew is and what a Jew should be. And I wanted to broaden that scope a little bit when we talk about our own people.
Well, that's what's been so interesting for me living in Israel. Although I can really, wait, some of what you're saying resonates with me because even though I've been here for a long time, for almost 33 years, I still am very American in the way that I see things and certain things that are emotional for me. Absolutely. Like you mentioned about Sweden, it's in there. But one of the things that's interesting in Israel is seeing people from so many of the different countries that you mentioned and more, and realizing how multicultural the country is and how many ethnicities we have within the Jewish world. So is that the blessing of the diaspora that we went out and became such different people and different foods and different colors and different songs for the same prayers and different ways of celebrating the same holidays? If you go into like the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, which I believe is open again, they have one entire room filled with Chanukias, with menorahs. And you see the different styles and ways that people lit, but they were all lighting and they were all celebrating the holiday. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see. But the last on the list that I read was Venezuela. So how did that go for you, your Venezuelan trip?
Well, it was an adventure. It was like a typical Annika adventure in the sense that I was going to stay for a couple of weeks and I was there for 6 months. So that's usually how it goes when I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Right.
But it was one of the places that in my life that really captured my heart for better and for worse, for sure, because I had a couple of really dramatic experiences there. But it's also, there are plenty of places in the world that people talk about and then just never visit. And Iran, it's the same thing there. I went there for that very reason, because everyone has an opinion and then no one ever really goes and does the old school journalism of actually like sticking around and telling people what you see there. And I didn't understand fully. I knew that there was hardship because you understand it in a very like intellectual way, but I had never experienced tragedy and hardship and starvation and oppression in the way that I did in Venezuela. And I was supposed to be there, there had just been an election. And of course, Juan Guaido, the opposition leader, I just called, announced that he's the president. And there was this fight between Maduro and himself. And I was supposed to report on it and leave. And I realized very quickly, oh, wait, nothing is what it seems in this country. And I need to stick around and find out what's actually going on.
The justice warrior came out.
Yeah, because you want to find out, you want to understand what's, and Venezuela is really the onion of countries in the sense you just peel off and there's another layer. And then in the end, it was one of the most hopeful, but also it made me the most cynical I've ever become, because you get to see such corruption and such poverty that it forces everyone. You see the worst of man, in the sense that, if my children were starving like that, I saw babies starving to death in the street, mothers just having given birth, leave them literally in the street because they have nothing. They're hoping that somebody who has a little more than nothing will come and save them. And of course, I came to understand that if I lived here, so I'd be robbing people too. I'd be shooting people. It's nothing is, we call it mob rule or whatever, but it's so much more complicated. Of course, into it, the whirlwind of politics there, because I ended up being kidnapped first once by a militia on the border to Colombia, and then again by people that I worked with, which is very common, former police.
For ransom, or because they didn't like what you were reporting, or both?
Yeah. Well, the first time it was a political kidnapping. So that was, I was smart enough to I have an Iranian press pass still. So on me, and some, depending on where I travel, I use it. So I was carrying that, and I believe to this day that it saved my life because
the
of the
Iranian press pass, really?
Yes. Because I didn't speak now I speak some Spanish, but at the time I spoke hardly any Spanish. But I was on the ground with a gun to the back of my head, and these militiamen called colectivos were beating the shit out of the people I was with, and me included, and stealing all our things, and they were clearly high on coke, which is not that uncommon, on the border to Colombia, and and all I could say, you know, I could say I'm a socialist in Spanish, and I
Okay.
and I held up my Iranian press pass, and I
Wow.
said in English, you know, if you kill me, there will be trouble. Like, I'm an international journalist. If you kill me, there will be trouble. Like, don't kill me. And I believe that that's why I got away with it. You know, lying about being a socialist and claiming allegiance to
To
the regime
Iran.
in Iran. But you do what you got to do when there are guns involved. And after that,
What
of
was
course,
going through
I
your
became.
head? What was going through your head at that moment? Do you remember
Well,
even?
I had a very Jewish moment. I'm actually, like, I'm writing my second book now, and I'm writing about Venezuela specifically. And it took a while because I was in so shape once I got back. But the thing that went through my head when I had that gun to the back of my head and I heard it, and I'd never been in that in that close vicinity to guns before, but I did know the sound of when you like uncock a gun,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard it like reverberate in my skull because it, like, the sounds get amplified with the
Right.
bone in your head, so you hear it. It's this very dramatic thing, and I had this very Jewish moment because I realized, oh, so I'm going to die, and the first thing I could think of was, oh, I have to say the Shema, and it was like
Wow.
suddenly really important to me that I had to do that, but I couldn't, and it was cause for like crisis for me afterwards because I couldn't, like, there was no words forming either in my mouth or in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it, and I couldn't, you know, and then things unfolded, and thank God, like a couple of hours later it was over. But I really thought about it a lot
Wow.
afterwards because I had this thought, like, I was like, wow, is it God that understands that it wasn't the time and I couldn't say it? Or
Mm-hmm.
was there something? And I really thought about it intensely afterwards, and there was no, you know, not the drama of my life passing by, you know, or something. It
Mm-hmm.
was just
Mm-hmm.
this very toughless thing of like, I should probably say the Shema, like, you're going to die, so
Although if
you
you'd
have to
said it
do that
out
now.
loud and they'd understood it, that might not have gone too well. So maybe it was a good thing.
Didn't
Who
occur to me
knows?
didn't occur to me at the time, but it was really that thing where I was like,
Wow.
wow, I had this one thing I had to do and I couldn't do it. And but it so that then put me on the map, unfortunately, for the authorities
Mm-hmm.
in Venezuela, because it became worldwide news,
Right.
and it became, you know, I tweeted about it afterwards. It became a really big deal, and Marco Rubio tweeted about it, and it was this whole thing. And of course, that's not a popular event.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't make them look
National
good.
journalist talks
Right.
about colectivos and about, you know, the narco mafia.
Mm-hmm.
No. So that put a target on my back, and it made it very, very difficult for the amazing people that I worked with, you know. And I ended up staying for 4.5 more months. And of course, I got myself kidnapped once again, and I ended up sneaking. I got deported once. I snuck over the border to Colombia using a rabbi helped me sneak over the border to Colombia. So it was, but it was, you know, it's a place that was going to stay with me for life for obvious reasons, but also a place that I know that I'll return to, because that, well, everyone who travels knows that some places unexpectedly,
Yes.
they just capture your heart.
Yes.
And Venezuela is like that, because there's so much death, but also there's more life there than I've ever experienced anywhere, and such beauty in the darkness. And but it's, you know, it drew me in,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't get out. So I ended up staying, and even when I left after 6 months, it was really difficult to leave. It really was.
Wow. I interviewed a few months ago the former, his name just flew out of my head, the former chief rabbi of Venezuela. And he spoke
Oh
about the
wow.
country like that also, that
Yeah.
there's something so incredible. And he's so pained by what it's going through now, because it's
Yeah.
such a beautiful country with such incredible people. And the government has just totally, I mean, just destroyed it.
Yeah, and I think it's you know, I met a lot of very left-wing journalists in the first weeks that I was there, because there had just been an election and so much unrest, and I think, you know, I'm it's one of the things that upset me the most, and it upsets me also because I heard it a lot during the 2016 election. You know, when they talk about Venezuela, when young people and socialists talk about Venezuela and these glowing terms and talk about, you know, the beauty and possibility of Venezuela, and I'm like, you need to go. There are dead babies everywhere. Like, do you understand that this is what they did? Like, they destroyed a country that should be one of the richest on earth. And it's terrible, you know, and these people, that old people and young people that are struggling to get by, and entire generations are, you know, ruined. And I think that for me, it pained me to see that people don't care to actually see the reality of things, but they prefer to, you know, retweet theories and live their life according to others' opinion and other theories. And I think, you know, as journalists, we have that really holy responsibility to go to a place and tell the truth. And that became my mission, again, for better or worse. Maybe I overstayed my welcome and then some, but it really became, it highlighted that mission for me when I was in Venezuela, because I was like, wow, we need to talk about this, because I know how it is. People move on very quickly when it's no longer in the news. Those babies are still dying, man. You know, it doesn't change for them. Even if it changes for us, it doesn't change for them. So, yeah.
I see the pain on your face. I mean, because
it hasn't
gone away.
It's very, no, and it's I think it happened. It will take a lot for you to be, you know, beat up and kidnapped twice and then still go back to a place. So it says something. It maybe says something about my level of crazy, but it also says something.
Okay, not mutually exclusive.
About no, but it says something about the greatness of Venezuela. And I feel very strongly, you know, for it and about it, and I'm looking forward to going back, you know.
One of the other countries you visited was Morocco, which has been in the news, of course, in the last few days, because there's a possibility now of some kind of treaty. I don't know exactly. I don't want to call it a peace treaty, but some kind of open relations with Israel. What do you think? What do you think about that, given that you were there not so long ago and you know the community there and how they're living?
Yeah, and I would say that it's important to not be naive. I think it's not that surprising. I think, of course, there has been an understanding with the Moroccan leadership for a longer time. So that is, it's not Iran, you know. So it has a functioning Jewish community. But I also think you live as a Jew at the pleasure of the king. And I wrote this because, of course, the Jews, I was there for Pesach. And I, you know, was sitting in this outside Seder in a beautiful in the compound in the old city in Marrakesh. And it was a marvelous experience. But it's also, you know, they're safe because their neighbors are afraid to pass by the synagogue because they think they will get the evil eye from Jews. You know, like this is, and the understanding that they have is one of subservience. And it's important to be, it doesn't mean that you can't have a beautiful and fully functioning Jewish community, but it is important to speak the truth of what that is. Right. I think the treaty is an amazing thing because it means you will have an influx of Jews that will visit and that the Jewish community will hopefully flourish from that. But there are places where I found that there was a more highly functioning relationship between Muslims and Jews. And I wouldn't take Morocco as an example of that because it's functioning, they have an understanding, there's safety, but it's safety because of benevolence. But I think all Jews in exile feel that to a certain extent. Swedish Jews have that as well. You know, that is, you know, that's the thing that makes it different when I step onto Israeli soil. You know, when I'm in Israel, I kind of walk different and I feel different. Yeah. And it's something that you don't realize the first time, but the more you go, you understand that, oh, wait, when I see, because I had a conversation with my children about this, because they were like super excited about seeing a soldier with a kippah, and it was like so absurd to them when they were little. Right. And as I explained it to them, I sort of explained it to me because I said, this is the one place in the world where those guns are there to protect us.
Right.
Like they work for us. And it's like, and it makes you feel so different
Yeah.
as a, you know, as a Jew, as a person, because the next thought is a sad one, because you're like, oh, this is what non-Jews feel all the time. Like, this
Yeah.
is what it is for Swedish people, like
Right.
regular Swedish people, that they don't have that, you know, nervousness. Like when you hear somebody, you know, in the stairway outside my apartment, like I react different because of who I am and because of the mood in this country. So that is different. And realizing, you know, if you're younger, I still count myself as a non-old person, let's say. Let's not use the word younger, but non-old person. So I don't know, thank God, what it is to live in a world where Israel doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
But I did understand it when I was in Iran, for example, because when you're cut off from Israel completely, then you also walk differently. Then you have to manage your life and hold yourself, you know, you're accountable to this regime. And there's always a threat. There's a constant threat because you don't have that life raft. The reason I can be cocky and I can be outspoken and I can act the way I do while being in exile is because, by the grace of God, there is Israel. So I kind of know, I have all my paperwork always, like I have all my rabbinic paperwork ready at every time. I always know where my passport is. So I know that, God forbid something happens, I'm out.
There's a country at your back.
You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what you see, and I think it's such an important lesson, and I hope that young Jews speak to older Jews in their community who has lived in a time where Israel didn't exist, because there's such an important lesson to learn, and it gives you gratitude and humbles you so much. That one of the things that after I went to Iran that I stopped doing was, for example, I don't engage in debates over Israeli politics anymore as an outsider, because I understand how vulgar that is as a person who I didn't serve in the army. You know, so far my children are not in the army in Israel, and I need to be quiet and say thank you. And that's pretty much my role. And it's important, like that humility, because they're giving everything. Like they're the reason that I can go and, you know, go to Goshen and eat meats and, you know, feel free, walk on the beach and have this, you know, or walk through Jerusalem and like I own the place, because I do, you know, so I can have this attitude because a lot of other people, you know, are bleeding and serving and sacrificing for that. So after going to Iran and understanding what my life would be if I didn't have it, was an incredible and very important lesson in humility of how to relate to Israel as a Jew in exile, because it's my country, but it's not my state yet.
Right.
And it's a very important definition, I think, and distinction. And I think if more Jews understood that and had that opportunity to learn from countries where Israel, you know, where you can't have relationships with Israel, I think the fraught relationship between diaspora Jews and Israeli Jews perhaps would improve a little bit, and you wouldn't have so many Batinskis, you know, who are constantly getting in the business of a state that they actually don't bleed for. And I think maybe we'll never get there because we're Jews and it's complicated and we get in each other's business either way. But it's like a dream that I have, that maybe that.
It sounds like you go to these countries to report and to discover about the communities there, but you come out discovering something for yourself. Like you take a piece of it into you. It's not just like a cold reporting and this is what's going on in Iran or this is what's going on in Finland.
Right.
Like you really absorb what they're living into you, and then of course in your writing, and express it just so beautifully, because most of us, let's face it, are not going to be able to do what you did for a host of reasons.
Right.
Fear being at the top of the list for a lot of people. She was actually in Iran? Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Iran?
Right.
Like Iran?
No, I think it's like a very personal, some people love it about my writing and some dislike it, because I get so involved.
Yes.
Like clearly, I mean, Venezuela, Iran, all of it. I get so personally involved in it. But I think, you know, it was a luxury for me to be able to kind of work that we all have issues with our Jewish identity. Like, we got issues. It's a
Yeah,
complicated relationship to
absolutely.
ourselves, to God, to Israel, to all these things. And we're struggling with it because it fluctuates through life. You're observant, you're not, you know, in a relationship, and not like this. These are things that we struggle with. And for me, I think also, how do I be all these things and live in the diaspora? How do I express myself? What is it to be a Jew? You know, what's the difference between being Sephardi and being Ashkenazi? And how important is it to be Ashkenazi? Like, all of these things were things that were running through my mind. And I was able to play with those concepts and understand a lot of things about myself. Like, I came away sort of wishing I was Sephardi. I was like, oh, this speaks to me. This speaks to me much more. Like, I understand this very much. This is a culture that I feel at home in a way that I don't necessarily in an Ashkenazi, you know, situation. So it was very, you know, it was sort of my coming of age Jewishly project in a way. I felt comfortable enough in my Jewishness and my knowledge to do it, because I think I needed to get to a point where I knew enough to go out into this world and be able to take in what people were saying and be able to teach others through this book. But it's sort of a climax of a journey that has gone on my entire life.
Right.
Because it's a point of pride that I was able to do that. And now I have friends all over the world. You know, I ended up not staying in a hotel in Djerba. Suddenly I was living with a Jewish family, you know, and you know, I was sharing the downstairs with all the girls, and they taught me how to do makeup, because apparently they didn't think I knew how. So I learned how to do Tunisian makeup, and, you know, and the same thing happened in Iran. And because you were family, like, at the end of the day, that's the amazing thing. And that's why I can't but be. You said that I seemed hopeful in the book, and I am, because we have this like common thread. And walking into, it's hard to, I tried to explain it and describe it in the book, but, you know, the first time I walked into a synagogue in Iran was in Tehran for Kabbalat Shabbat. And I was really nervous. Obviously, like, I was in Iran all by myself. And you walk into a synagogue with a hijab on for the first time in my life, like that in itself is so bizarre and it's like emotional. But then I walk in, and I realized, oh, I understand this, because I'm hearing Lecha Dodi, and I'm like, oh wait, like, we're
that's the Friday night song. Oh,
yeah. Yes. No, so I'm like, oh, of course. Why was I nervous? Like, we're yeah. So the setting is different, and it's really weird that I'm in Tehran, but like, we're family. So what am I worried about? Like, and that's what keeps happening. That wherever I go, I just have new family that I haven't met yet. And you're welcomed as family, and you argue as family, and you struggle, and you love each other like family. But there's not a single country that I've been in the book where I don't, like, they're all my Facebook friends. We all we all communicate because we're family. And we have all the, like, it's such a good time to be Jew, and it's such a beautiful world Jewishly, that, you know, I feel incredibly hopeful. And as for, you know, I have some pretty clear conclusions in the book that I know I understood from the beginning. Once I realized what my conclusions would be, they err on the side of, you know, conservative or like orthodox, in the sense that I saw which communities were doing well.
Right.
I understood why, you know, they are religious. They are homogenous.
The ones who keep those traditions are going to be the ones that survive. Yeah. That just makes sense.
And you know, and you know, for Hanukkah, it's sort of obvious message that, you know, we got to fight. It's about fighting for who you are and what you do, no matter what. And I was really, I said in the book, like not even half jokingly, that, you know, it's sort of a call to return to the shtetl in a way. That the ones that did really well, they had these narrow Jewish lives. Like, yeah, you go out, but if your core and your center is not Jewish,
Right.
If I wouldn't be Jewish first and Swedish second, my life would be different. Like, it's important to understand, okay, what is it at the core of me that makes me me? And that for me can never be Jewish culture. You know, it has to be faith driven, or at least observance driven, in the sense that we still have something, like a remnant of something left, because, you know, you may not be religious or observant, but you have to have that one thing, even if it's lighting Hanukkah candles or candles for Shabbat.
Right.
Your children or grandchildren will remember, because then they can be lamplighters for their children and grandchildren in the future. And I think that's what I took away, that we can't err from that. Like, that's what keeps us. Like, you know, they always say that we don't keep traditions, they keep us.
It's true. Right.
And there was really no getting away from it, you know.
They say, especially about Shabbat, that Shabbat has kept us.
Right.
Right. Right.
And it's one of the things that, you know, when you read my book, you'll see that it's the thing that I did as a rule. Again, like, I may never be as religious or as observant as I want to, but I have a rule that I always light candles and make Kiddush wherever I am. And I did on every trip, even when I was hiding from police in Venezuela in a really bad hotel room, I was, you know, making Kiddush and lighting candles, and I did it, and it became so much more important.
Right.
You know, because you understand, okay, I may not be able to do anything else, but I can do these things. Like, that's the rule. If I have two things and I stick to them, I'm going to do them no matter what. And it became incredibly important. And I think, you know, I think that's a lesson for us in some sense, that it doesn't have to be everything. Like, it can be a Jewish smorgasbord, but just pick a couple of things and let's, like, hold on to them.
Right.
And then maybe someone else after you will do more, you know, God willing.
Was there one place that you went to that you were like, they're not going to be around for very long?
Cuba was a strong,
really?
Yeah, because they were so good. You know, the communists did a really good job in taking away the essence, you know, of, and when you eradicate people's identity and replace them with ideology like that, they won. Like, it was really heartbreaking to see, because they try, and I went to the shul, of course, and I did the things that I usually do, but it was really difficult to see, you know, and it became this, like, reverse, sort of, not even philo-Semitic, but because of poverty, that people were trying to claim to be Jewish in order to make Aliyah, because all they wanted was to get off the island.
Right.
And they said that, you know, the shul is filled with non-Jews on Shabbat because they know there's food. There's a little bit of extra food, so you can get an egg, or you can get some beans or bread. And, you know, but they lose that. And they won. Like, it was the only place where I thought, yeah, if I'm back here in 10 years,
wow,
it's a plaque, you know. And that was really difficult. But on the other hand, out of 12 countries, you know, then take places like Palermo that were at the heart of the Inquisition.
Right.
And I was there to see the rebirth of that community of amazing, you know, the organization Israel has done amazing things there.
Yeah.
And I was there to see the rededication of an old synagogue that they had stolen and turned into a church, and now is being turned back into a synagogue, and people with Jewish lineage who were converting Orthodox, and in that time and doing that because they had that light within them. So, like, as down in the dumps as I was in Havana, you know, there's a million other places where you see proof of, like, it just takes that one, like, who's a little bit difficult and has that feeling of, like, there's something here. And it was incredibly inspirational. Like, I standing by the old mikveh in Palermo, you know, going down the stairs, it was now right under the center square in Palermo.
Wow.
And you see, like, it was so powerful, because you feel, oh, this is the literal rebirth of Jewish life here, where they skinned us alive. You know, I was at the old head of the Inquisition, and which is now the Museum of the Inquisition. And it was so powerful. You know, I took what is probably the most powerful image of the entire book, which is the wall where and outside there's a big bell where they would ring and bring them out and execute them and torture them. And inside they would hold all the Jewish prisoners, and they etch things into the wall. And then there's this giant etching of the city of Jerusalem, and it says Jerusalem under it. And it's the last thing that somebody used their fingernails to etch into the wall before they die. And how could I not be, you know, you have to be all filled up with inspiration from that. Like, you can either say, oh, screw this, Europe is terrible. Like, or you can say, wow, that's the Jewish spirit. You have one thing to say before they skin you alive, and it's Jerusalem.
Right.
You know, like, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And
I was in Portugal last year, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Looking at the stakes where they burnt people alive, seeing the women, the list of women on the wall, because that's what they killed more women, because they know that the women were giving down the faith. So they killed the mothers, so they wouldn't say the Shema Yisrael with their children on their pillow. Yeah. You know, and that was really burnt into me. I know exactly what you're saying. That is so powerful. It is so powerful. But to be a Jewish mother and woman and be able to say to them, like, you didn't die for nothing, because I'm going to take on what you couldn't do, and I'm going to make sure that this never ends in whatever way I possibly can. It's like you take that on yourself to a great degree. That's how I felt. Like, we've got a lot to do. Yeah, and you feel responsibility, and I feel also that I am standing on the shoulder of giants here, because these people, I mean, how many people would have just cried and denounced their faith? I mean, not that that didn't happen, and understandably so, but these giants of faith and conviction, you know, and again, Hanukkah is a good example of this, of what we remember and celebrate of our heroes, and such heroic acts to do what? To make sure that I can be here today. So my choices matter. And I think it's an amazing lesson for us as adults, for our children, that it does matter. Like, one person really matters, and what you do and what you choose to do Jewishly as an ambassador of your people really matters, because someone will speak of you, you know, 1,000 years from now. Like, we speak of them and we remember them, and you are that person. And it's incredibly important. And I think it's the art of storytelling, and it's why I wanted to do the book, and how we tell our stories as Jews. The people, you know, be it the Seder or whatever. Yes. Yeah, so but really, it's so important to me, and it's me hopefully telling, you know, being so personal in the book and being so engaged with the people. I also want it because I love them. You know, I tell the story of my, you know, one of my best friends, now 91-year-old Isidore, who goes to my shul. He's the, you know, he's the main person in the chapter about Sweden, and I got to spend time with him and hear his Jewish story as a Swedish Jew. And I want to celebrate, like, I want everybody else to know how cool he is. Like, I want everybody to know what it took for him to live 90 years as an Orthodox Jew in Sweden growing up knowing only Yiddish. Like, and I want them to know about the Jews in Djerba and in Iran, and not look at them with these, like, you know, cocked heads and be like, oh, poor Jews of the diaspora. You're like, no, we are, you know, like, the man in Djerba said to me that he was like, once we were talking about the Kristallnacht, I was sitting in the shul and there was always no people there, and some Jews just come and hang out. You know, they have their little parliament in shul because it's a safe place to be. And we were talking about the Kristallnacht, and he said, like, once upon a time we were shards of glass, but now we're diamonds. And I thought this was so, and I felt it, you know, because they broke us once and they broke us twice, but we're diamonds. You know, like, the more pressure that is applied, the stronger we get. And we see that now. And it's, you know, I'm both Ashkenazi and Swedish, so I shouldn't be this upbeat and positive about things, but you should be like, cold and exactly. I have two reasons to be, like, really really so two negatives cancel, you know. You see? Yeah, there you go. You get a positive.
but it's like, how could I, like, how could I not be? Because it's meeting those people, was the highlight so far of my life, because it's amazing to be able to tell people stories. And I know that different chapters will resonate with different people, like I had old Jewish men write to me about the story from Finland with a soldier who fought both with and against the Nazis, right? And that's an amazing story. And he didn't, he was a powerful man when I met him, and incredibly, at 100 now, he's since passed, but it's this amazing thing to have met him and to understand how he was thinking. And he was an Orthodox Jew in the Finnish army, and he spoke with such pride and conviction, and that, to be able to bring that story to the world, I know that will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people will identify with different parts of this book in their own way. And I hope that the takeaway is being as obnoxiously positive as I am.
You hear that, wow. Everybody? Don't read the book if you're not going to be positive at the end of it.
Yeah, because
although a couple tissues would be handy while you're reading.
It would be handy, but it's
like a celebration.
Yeah. Yeah, you will need that, but it's a celebration of survival at the end. Like, it's a very fitting, it's a Hanukkah gift, Yeah. This is a celebration of Jewish survival. Yeah, so, and I'm really happy to have done that.
So let me just ask you, because I've been trying to get you for an interview for a while, but you were a little indisposed for the last few months. So where have you spent most of our Corona era? Because it wasn't in Sweden near the Zoom.
So I was in West Africa, in Ghana, for 8 months, where a few of those were plans to go there and write and do research, but the majority was they closed their country very quickly and then stayed shut for 5 months. So I just lived in Ghana for 8 months, and it was a very interesting, and I would say mostly just happy experience, that I was blessed in getting to know a brand new country, a part of the world that I have never been in, and of course a new Jewish community.
Of course.
So I now have a brand new Jewish family in Ghana. And so I spent, the Chagim, I spent Pesach, I spent all the holidays at Chabad Ghana, and I'm now sort of, adopted into the family, and it was great.
Yeah, and as you said to me before, Sweden is now really, really cold. Like, it was cold before.
It's so cold, yeah.
But now it's really cold.
And I don't, it's wherever I go, I don't fit in. Maybe that's what I'm actually doing with all of this journalism. That
I'm classic wandering Jew.
Yeah, I'm gonna find my sweet spot at some point. Like, I'm gonna find the spot like this, but it's
or
now
maybe
in
not.
Sweden.
Or maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe your sweet spot is fitting in so many different places and not really fitting in anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe and asking questions, because that's really the ultimate Jewish thing, is constantly asking questions. We can be yelling at God, why, and of the world, and not always getting answers. Most of the time, not getting answers.
Yeah. No, I like that idea, and I must say I'm enjoying life, wandering and figuring it all out, or at least trying to figure it all out. Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. So where can people get your book?
Oh, everywhere, I hope.
Okay.
They can get it on Amazon. Exile, Portraits of the Jewish Diaspora. So you can get it where books are sold, as they so politely say. So, and God willing, I will be in Israel and give some talks once we are allowed to go give talks to actual people again. So
yes.
I look forward to that.
And I look forward to seeing you here.
Yes.
Absolutely. For sure.
Can't wait.
Long time coming. Okay. Thank you so much. Annika Hernroth-Rothstein, for, I think, first of all, a very illuminating and moving conversation, really. And thank you for what you're doing, because it's got an element of risk to it. But I think you going in and taking out the stories, in some cases, right before they disappear forever, especially with some of the older people, is something that is priceless. It really is priceless, and what most of us couldn't do. So we're going to do this vicariously through you. All right. So,
Good. I look forward to
Chanuka
continuing.
Sameach. Thank you so much.
Chanuka Sameach.
And,
Thank you.
and everybody, I hope wherever you are, you're enjoying what is called the Chag HaOrim, the Holiday of Lights. Eve Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network, with thanks to Ben and to Tabitha, and broadcasting, as I have been for quite a few months, from the heart of Judea. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.